Welcome back to the Carnivore and Beyond podcast. And today we've got Holley Reeves. I discovered Holley on my Carnivore and Beyond Facebook group, and she was so funny and she had such great wisdom as well, which is a great combination for me. And then I noticed that she was also a shaman and had some wonderful stories. And she doesn't like to be called a shaman, I don't think, but we'll get into that. But all sorts of fascinating things going on there. So I thought we'd chat about Holley's fantastic life journey here. One little message before we chat to Holley. I want to keep these podcasts free for everybody. So have a look at the link below, and there's a donate button on each page, on each episode. You have to go to each episode to find it at the bottom. So if you fancy bunging a couple of dollars our way to get some more out every month, I've got a list of some fabulous people, but at the moment Holley's at the top of the list. So here she is. Isn't it great to have her on? Hey, hello Holley, lovely to meet you at last.
Hey Phil, thank you so much. You might not know this, but my very first carnivore podcast that I listened to was yours truly, Phil Escott, when Sean Baker interviewed you. Yes, and I went, whoa, where have these guys been all my life? And I joined your group immediately and have felt at home. And it's my people. My whole life I just thought, where are my people? And I found them.
I know, I kind of felt like that. I only started it for about 10 people Christmas before last, and all of a sudden there's like 12,000 or something now. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's crazy. So your introduction to that, you heard me on Sean's podcast going on about perfectly formed turds and stuff. I'm surprised you carried on listening.
You know what I remember the most about that is, if I wake up in the morning and I feel like prawns, I have prawns. I don't know why that stuck in my mind, but I'm like, I love this guy. But I don't know if we should probably do a disclaimer for your viewers as well, because they may not be familiar with a Southern accent. European, yes, but the Southeastern United States, not so much.
I think most of my listeners are in the States, so it's fine. It's me that I'll have to put a disclaimer out about,
Okay, good. I'll try to keep it clean.
So no, don't do that. So listen, you sent me this amazing bio. It blew me away. I mean, such incredible story, and I want to pick a load of this apart. My first question for you is, you seem to have a lot of health issues and stuff when you were very young, but when did the whole spiritual awareness start? When did this start to come to you?
Certainly 21, 22, my big awakening, Phil, it was rough. It was 22. A lot of people, it depends on who you talk to and what their school of thought is. They'll call it like a spontaneous kundalini awakening, if you will. But I'd gone through so much, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, and dive into it. But I had just was laying in bed one night and it happened. Like, I just felt something open up in me. And I know this sounds crazy, and it probably not as crazy as everything I'm going to say in this particular interview, but I sat up straight in the bed and I said, my name is Ivory Moon, and I came here to make a difference and shed light on this world. And I laid back down and I vibrated, and not in a good way. My body shook for hours. It might have even lasted a whole day. I could not get up. I was, I didn't know what happened, but I knew, and my spiritual name, for the people who know me, I go by Ivory Moon. I don't really advertise or make a big deal about that, but that's my calling. And I just, what else do you want to know? It was bizarre. I'm sure you've talked to others that have gone through similar experiences. I can definitely tell you what happened when I finally left the house after that experience, but just the few days that I went through that, there's no question. It was almost as if every person that I was from previous died, and I was a whole new person from that point forward.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Hmm. Have you been there?
2006. It was funny, after all the sort of spiritual faffing about with all sorts of different techniques and God knows what. It was at the moment of letting go of them all where that happened. But it was funny. It was a real quiet one. It wasn't a big kundalini experience. I had something like that maybe 2013, and couldn't get up off the bed. I remember that. It was more like a kind of heart chakra blowing up thing, but it was the 2006 one. Yeah, it was that was when the person completely changed while remaining exactly the same. That was 2013. It was at the point of doing a load of Byron Katie stuff, of letting go of having to save everybody. I didn't realize how much pain that was causing me, And it was a real awakening there. But the whole thing of just sort of figuring out that everything's one, and there is no consciousness stemming from one place. It's consciousness flowing through you more like than consciousness emanating from you. And that was 2006. But later on, it was one where it was just getting rid of that thing that I think was kind of blocking my heart almost, and not having a heart for people who weren't healing, because because you've got to allow people to have their to have their mistakes, and all my best teachings came from my mistakes. So, when you see somebody going through mistakes and you have this dreadful pain for them, oh, this is my friend, and they're eating pizza and they've got this chronic disease and that chronic disease, and it really eats you up inside. Well, that's not really very compassionate for somebody's life journey. And so now it sort of appears like I do the same thing, because I still hassle them. But I just laugh. It's not my business, If it comes out and I end up going off on some diatribe, so what? It's just Phil. It's just the character. And that's what I do. But, with what I do now, it's great because people come to me, and I'm sure they do to you too. And so then you have people who are ready, so that's cool.
Are they? I don't know about that, Phil. But at least they're trying. I think one of the things that I've learned is you meet people where they're at, and it's not always easy. People will pay $250 to get their hair done, $100 to get their nails done every 2 weeks. But when it comes to spiritual health and spiritual healing, it's not something that is an accepted expenditure in the budget. But you absolutely can't move forward without placing value on that in your life. And it's gotten a lot easier as time has gone on, because like you, why are they, they want to heal. They ask me the questions, and then they refuse to do what their higher self or the spirit tells them to do. But you have to know that we're planting seeds as time goes on, and ultimately it's going to grow and be something beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Did you find that you talk to somebody and then after 6 months, they'll suddenly come back again when they're ready, Yeah, I've got to give a shout to my friend Peace Ravenwood on the group, because she's done this. Yeah, she's great, isn't she? And I met her when I was with Zahir Khan, who I did an earlier interview with him. He's great. He's just a spiritual teacher now, but so hilarious and so, irreverent, and I love him. We get on so well. But I went round to another friend's house with him to go and give a little talk, both of us, to some people, and Peace was there. And she was a little standoffish, and then she started messaging me and saying how horrendous it was, all this meat eating, and how veganism's great. And then she was so cool. Then suddenly one day she went, do you know what? My health has tanked, and you're right. And it was lovely to see how then she just opened up, and how cool she was. Because she was always really cool. She was just like we all have been at some point, just caught up in that vegan craziness, Yeah, but she was great. So hey, you got weaned, didn't you, onto goat colostrum and bone broth?
I knew you were going to bring that up. Yeah, so it is. It's absolutely. I mean, thank God, for my grassroots family. Ultimately, I was born into this world rejecting everything that they had to offer, and we did finally. My mom got discharged from the hospital because I managed to keep down a meal or two, which ended up being a soy formula. Which is interesting to say the least, but it was a special blend that the dietitian came up with, and I still was not good at all. It was constant vomiting and just, in today's world, they call it colic, but in reality, we're basically just screaming as infants and saying this isn't working for us. And I had some old school grandparents on both sides, and bone broth cooled in the bottle, and goat colostrum. Yes, we actually had goats on our farm, and my grandfather would go out and milk the goats and bring it in for Holley to eat. And I was able to grow and thrive and do what I needed to do until it became time to eat regular food. And then things went awry once again. If I could have just suckled at the teat of the goat, I think I probably would have been fine.
I think you probably would. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? All these babies being brought up on this soy formula and stuff. It's just madness, and it's a recipe for all kinds of nonsense. Yeah, but it still led you, ages 1 to 10. It said in your bio, still had loads of digestive issues and stuff. And what was going on there? What were you eating around that time?
It's interesting. For the most part, I was eating whole foods. Our family was raised. I come from an Italian side of the family where my grandmother calls it peasant food. Pork fat, pork cracklings, things of that nature. But we had a slew of vegetables. There was a garden in the back at both grandparents' houses. My mom was raised to be a cook. She cooked all of our food. We had very little junk, but any element of junk sent me down a spiral for days. Now, that's looking back on it. We didn't really realize it when it was going on at that time. My mom, I had constant diarrhea, constant vomiting. I'm sure there were ancillary emotional and empath type things going on as well, but we couldn't put our finger on it. My mom would take me to the doctor. She's like, she lives in the bathroom. Like, if we need to find her, she's in the bathroom. And, they did all kinds of tests. It was, as a 6-year-old, it was unbelievable. And Dr. Ledbetter, who's no longer with us, bless his heart, he was actually a pioneer in his days. He did everything he could. And he diagnosed me with this intuitive diagnosis, a nervous stomach. And he said, basically, anything that's a stimulant, just stay away from it. So that would be sugar, caffeine, chocolate, which turned out great because I never really acquired a taste for chocolate or for sweets. But as time went on, and the sad, the standard American diet, it's filled with hidden sugars and sweets. So I might not be eating a sweet treat, but it still has a dramatic effect. It's interesting. I remember going to a sleepover as a young girl. And do you remember the Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies?
No, I think that must be an American thing.
Yeah, it was a Little Debbie snack cake type thing. And I'll never forget, I'd never had anything like that. And I ate one at the party, and my mom had to come pick me up. I was literally behind the house vomiting profusely. And the mother at the party, she said, I don't know. She was just playing with the kids, and then she was violently ill. And then, we discovered, I still think about that today. I can still taste that oatmeal cream pie in my mouth. And I said, okay, mental note to self, if it comes in a box, I probably don't need to eat it. But it ended up going a lot further than that as time went on.
I remember having a similar experience with some horribly dried out spaghetti cheese in Jordan and just vomiting all night. I don't know what the hell was in there, but Jesus. And now you get a memory of it for your whole life, don't you? If there's
get a memory for your whole life. Like to this day, I can walk into Walmart, which that's an American thing, and I can smell it. Like it just wafts through the aisles. It's like, oh, here comes the oatmeal cream pie. I run in, get my toilet paper, and get the hell out.
Because you're going to need it.
Because you're going to need it. You got to stay stocked up on that, Phil.
So what happened? What happened with this? You were found unconscious at one point, and then you had your appendix out. Did you actually have appendicitis, or did they just whip something out because they were...
Whip it out, Phil. Whip it out. Who the hell knows? It's like, it was all a blur. It's my symptoms, which made no sense. I had nausea, vomiting for a couple of days, nothing new, but I couldn't sit down. I would go to sit in a chair and I would have to sit to the left side because I had sharp pains in my tailbone. And I guess it got to the point where my electrolytes were just completely out of whack, and they found me unconscious, took me to the emergency room. I have no memory of any of this. This is all, third party. This is what happened. I woke up 2 days later in the intensive care. They had just extubated me or pulled the breathing tube out. And at that time I learned that they had removed my appendix. They did say that because they blew up my entire stomach, they went in to do an exploratory lap and look around, see what was going on. Let's find out what's going on with her. Because obviously my history and physical, I've had horrible GI issues. The doctor did say that when he got to my appendix, so your appendix have two little nodules on the end. He said they were swollen and black at that time. And that when he went, but they were not located where your appendix should be, which are on this right side. They were actually down in my sacrum area. So when he snipped them, they exploded into my abdomen, which did, a full-blown bloodborne infection. They ended up washing me out, my entire intestines out. And bless his heart, the surgeon was so sweet. He was like, I'm convinced I'm not going to give this woman a big scar, for the rest of her life. So I had this tiny little scar, but they had blown up my abdomen. So you can imagine the gas for like 7 to 10 days afterwards. I was praying for a fart. And it happened, and then all of a sudden I'm healed and they send me home. No, but I did wake up from that scenario. It's interesting. I didn't really put this in my bio, but as a young girl, I wanted to be a judge. That was my fantasy. I would put on these gowns of my mom, and I would always carry a hammer around and hammer out the judgment for people. And she had no idea where it came from. And she said, I'm like, well, I guess she's going to be a judge. And I woke up from that experience, that near-death experience, which I don't know I think I put it in the bio that they had actually shocked me a few times. And I had life-threatening heart arrhythmias, and they didn't really know what was going on. I definitely visited the other side when that happened.
Do you have memories? You have memories of that?
I do. But what's interesting is I had always dreamed about that. That was my dream state anyway. So it didn't seem that odd to me. It felt like just a really long dream. And we can definitely dive into that in just a second. But when I woke up, I looked at my mom and I said, plot twist, things have changed. I'm going to be a healer instantly when they took that tube out. And so I went from that point forward to figure out the best way to do that.
That's very cool. So that triggered that straight away. How old were you then?
17. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You started off on that healer path straight away, or did that take a while to kick in?
No, it was straight away. Yeah, it was straight away. Well, no, I didn't actually do anything with it professionally until after the Kundalini awakening at 22. That's when I started the ivory. Well, I did it. I've always done it. I can remember healing my uncle at the age of 5. He was very sick, and I visited him at the hospital and grabbed his hand, and just this white light just came down and flew through my body, and he woke up.
Wow, that's cool. So what happened in the near-death experience? Tell us a little about that.
It was very similar to the white light. It's a void. It is. I call it the void. It's a cool breeze. It's peaceful. I definitely saw people that I knew that had passed away. That was kind of my first experience with that aspect of spirituality. Was there this great white light at the end of the tunnel? No. It was a white light all around me. And I had voices, conversations talking to me, like subliminal messaging. It was a whisper, you were put here for a primary reason. You will heal people. But it was just a constant refeed of that. And it was 2 days, but it felt like 20 years when I woke up. It's all I could remember for a certain amount of time. It was like everything that had happened before that point was somebody else, and now I was a new person. I call that the true rebirth, the Christian philosophy of being reborn. I was reborn at that moment.
That's cool. So then you said you had a period of being obsessed with enlightenment. I remember I had this for years and years. And so what went on there? And did you have any specific practices you got caught up in, or what went on?
I tried it all. I mean, I was, the first book that I read that really spoke to me after that experience was Conversations with God, Marianne Williamson. Yeah.
Conversations with God was Neil Donald Walsh.
Yeah. Marianne is who I'm.
That in Annapurna Base Camp, up in the Himalayas, in 1999. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was it. It was 1999. That's when I read it. Yes, because I was into Prince at that time, so I specifically remember. But that was the first thing that really spoke to me, and I just kept going to the bookstore. I kept going to the library, everything I could read, and I tried it all. I'm like, I'm going to do the yogi. I'm just going to sit here for hours in nature until something magical happens. But what I realized is that something magical was happening with me all the time.
That's the key, isn't it? So many people spend too much time sitting there meditating and not enough time just doing life.
And existing, for when I walk out into the world, which I didn't really bring this up after the Kundalini experience, but when I left the house after those 2 days, and I had a multitude of psychic powers that just descended upon me, and it took, I call it several years after that, the dark years, because I walked out into the world. It's kind of like that person who's the shut-in or the lock-in, and they have agoraphobia, and they walk out and it's coming at you. And I had an onslaught of hearing voices, things that people have been locked up for years for, quite frankly. And I had no idea where it was coming from in the beginning. It never happened before. It was like energy. What I figured out is there's a conversation that's going on with you and I here, and then I'm simultaneously always having a higher self conversation with the people in my immediate circle. I've learned over time how to shut that out and only open up being able to hear that when I'm ready. But in the beginning, I didn't know how to do that. And, it's interesting. Maybe your viewers might find this fascinating, but the ones that clawed at me the worst were addicts, people who had addiction problems. And I would go, let's say, to Target or, anywhere where you're going to be around or that you're going to be around a multiple amount or large amounts of people. And these strong voices would come at me and they would be like, help me. I'm trapped in this body. And like, what? If I would have told anybody that I was going through that, they would have locked me away and said, we're done with her, So I had to figure out a way to figure out how to isolate that, send prayers and strength back to those spirits that were talking to me, and only accept what I was able to accept.
Yeah, it must be crazy when that kind of thing's going on. I remember seeing a wonderful article about, you must have seen it, how a shaman sees a hospital or mental illness or something like that, where there's all these people waking up. I mean, okay, there are some terrible states you can get into, but, when I think back to my mushroom days and just doing so much in one autumn and then just blowing up, but it was a complete awakening, but I resisted it. I remember sitting in a car and we were having a lift and I had this huge dissolving of everything, of Phil, and I just freaked out and I just couldn't accept it. It was exactly the same experience as 2006, but I guess I was ready then. But it left me in many dark years, and I would say dark years all the way up to when I got ill, probably in 2010. They just weren't quite so dark, and you're sort of left in that sort of semi-state of fighting what is, which is hideous. And if there's stuff like that going on that's so extreme, well, it's extreme as most people see it, that you're hearing voices and stuff like that and seeing into other dimensions, then it's very easy to think, right, I'm completely insane. It's very difficult to relax into something like that with our conditioning. How did you manage to do that? How did you manage to come to be at peace with it?
Well, I think it was trial by fire, because I ended up having a career in nursing. I'm a master's prepared nurse, and I worked in the pediatric intensive care at that portion of my life where there was a lot of death and chronic illness. So it was a constant playground for exercising my abilities, so to speak. Every night when I would go to work, you hear Jack Crees talk about it, the blue light and the hospital toxicity. And there's so many things about the hospital that I can say, but the spirituality aspect of it is huge. And I happen to have one friend, doctor friend, who worked in the unit where I worked, and he and I were very open, and we talked, and he was in tune as well. He was much older than I was, and he helped me. We saw a lot of the same things that were going on with the spirits of these patients, when they were in the crux of death or potentially facing death or their trauma or traumatic situation. And I got really good at shielding myself and learning how to allow the stimulus to come in slowly, because if I can't dissect what is happening, then I can't pray for you or project to you what your spirit needs to heal. And I realized at that point that I had the ability naturally, it's not something that I had to work at, to absorb. You can call it an empath, but it goes a little bit further than empath. To absorb people's illness, it would go down into my body and then I could expel it. And they would be better, but at that time, I didn't know exactly how to expel it appropriately. So it would get trapped often inside me, and I wouldn't know that it wasn't my problem or my illness. Does that make sense? and I learned you have to ground it out. So every time I would leave a shift from the hospital, I would have to do multiple different things to purge my system, both physically and spiritually. And it became very clear to me. I was working with a guru at that time who was helping me because I was going through a horrible experience physically. And it took it was years to figure out how to expel it. And it was getting caught up in my lymph. So I became diligent in cleansing my lymph, skin brushing. I bought a rebounder. Anytime that I would meditate, I would focus to flush through the lymph. But the food I was eating at that time was not helping the situation. I know we haven't gotten into the carnivore piece, but quite frankly, meat saved my life, Phil. No matter what I try to do. And so my energy and my power naturally does this. It draws this in from people. I'm meant to heal people. And I used to make a joke that I'm peroxide into this surgical wound. And picture pouring peroxide on your worst wound, and I'm bringing all of it to the top so that we can skim it off and get that wound to heal the way that it was supposed to. And so I naturally draw that out of people. And there's no real effort there. That was a gift that I was given. Whatever your belief system is, it is who I am, and it's what I came here to do. My name is Ivory Moon. I came here to make the world a better place. And in the meantime, it made me very sick.
Yeah, those dark years. But also, this is very cool for people to hear, because you're following your life path, And so many people, they miss their life path, and this is one of the huge things, I think, in healing, that people fail to do that, and you get told, oh, you can't be like that, who are you to do this? Even me, I've had friends saying, who the hell do you think you are? Having that Facebook group or writing a book or something like that, and it can really squeeze it out of somebody who doesn't have a strong character and turn them back from that life path. It's crazy. So, well done for accepting that. I'm sure there's a load of people who have experienced stuff like that, who just say, just blot it out, that's lunatic, go and get some drugs or something to cover it up. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely crazy.
And ultimately, I say it all the time, if I would have followed a secular way of thought, I would have been a drug addict. I've never taken any prescription drugs. I'm still on no prescription drugs. I went through absolute physical hell. I mean, I had blisters erupt from my skin. There were days that I laid in bed at night and I would cry, and I would know that I was not going to wake up the next morning. But somehow every day I woke up the next morning and my body hurt so bad, Phil. I would take a step. Sometimes I would fall over sideways, one way to the other. I had the worst sciatica that any person could ever imagine in my right hip. My feet hurt. I had heel pain. My very first issue was in the back of my scalp. This was when I was 23, and I remember sitting at the hospital, and literally my scalp just started bleeding. It was itching, and I was like, what is going on? It scabbed over. And that was like my tell, for months after that. That was my first flare, if you will. Some people talk about how they have different flares in parts of their body, or different parts that, where they may have a rash or psoriasis or whatever you want to call it. But that was my area of inflammation here in my occipital lobe, right at where your spine connects to the brain. And it would just throb. I would lay in bed at night, my whole head felt like it was on fire. And I remember specifically praying, on multiple different occasions. I can't do it. I can't live in this world anymore. The vomiting, I had gotten control of for the most part, but I would have periods especially when I worked with a client who had a really dark energy or a dark attachment. The vomiting, it was like an exorcism, I hate to say it that way, but it's like I would heal this person. They would walk away feeling great, and I would spend 2 days vomiting. And it's not the type of vomiting where you just go, I need to go do like a dainty feminine vomit. No, it would last for 2 days, and it was projectile. And
well, head spinning round and everything, nails coming out, frogs, everything.
The movies are Hollywoodized, but it's true. I'm like, this is not normal. It's the kind of like you had no warning and you would jump out of bed and it just was everywhere. And I started I did everything. We didn't even talk about the veganism that I attempted for years and years and years, because clearly that is the way to spiritual enlightenment. But the more veggies and the more fruit I had, the worse it got. And I know food has to be an answer. And if you talk to psychics, if you talk to healers, they will tell you that eating is a way to ground themselves. When you're out in the ether and you're dealing with all these different things, which I do a lot of different techniques now. And, I venture out into the ether and then you have to come back down to earth. But I can't use food as a way to ground myself, because those healers, and it's nothing against them, they're doing the best that they can, they become very unhealthy because they're eating what they think is healthy, which we have figured out is not necessarily the case, especially for those of us who have been around for a very long time. And we were not meant to live like this. I mean, don't even get me started on the EMFs and everything else.
I know, it's nuts, isn't it? I see this so much in spiritual people. It's really sad. They have they have this diet that they stick to, and they get skinnier and skinnier, or fatter and fatter, and grayer in their skin. And I get the feeling that it's they get this lightness to start with, and they think, oh, it's great, it's all holy and light and whatever. But what suddenly occurred to me was, okay, maybe it's connecting you with some higher chakras at some point, but what's wrong with the lower ones? Why do we have this higher, lower thing? They're just different ones, and they all need to be kept healthy. And we need to have this vision of, this view of every aspect of life. And, I keep slagging off the TM movement really, but, it's done with a heart, because some of these are my old friends who I've known since the 80s, and they're not well. And, just a little shift, and just they're not prepared to take it. And some have died of cancer by not taking that little shift. And the only ones who've ever reversed anything serious are me and my mum, who died of pneumonia last year, but a cancer reversed by getting off all the plants and a few other things. And they just can't see it, and they can't accept it, and they actually forfeit their life for it, for that weird half-life of spacing around in a couple of not particularly opened upper chakras, where they become like snowflakes and they can't take life, and there's no sense of humor. You see, what I love about, I did that Carnivore group, and then I did the Beyond group, and the people who filtered in there are really quite interesting, because you find the spiritual people, but you don't find the snowflakes anymore. You can make the most revolting jokes and stuff, and they're absolutely fine with it, and you can tell they're all laughing. And I think that's exactly how we're supposed to be. You're telling me that in ancient times you weren't sitting around the campfire making horrendous bawdy jokes. It wasn't happening. It wasn't this snowflakery happening. So, that's what I loved about you when I saw you on there, because you've got all this knowledge and whatever, and still you'll make these tremendous comments that have me in stitches, and not many people do.
Well, you bring up a good point about the lower chakras versus the higher chakras, and I think that's the key. That's the element. If you are grounded, if you are rooted in the way that you're supposed to be, then you can adapt to this this 3D world that we live in, this moment, this element, which I take great pride in that, where I have adapted and I have adjusted. It took a lot of suffering to get here. But the only way I stay sane, Phil, is to laugh. The only way that you can keep these dark entities at bay, I go out into the ether with people who have experienced horrible things, horrible traumas, where their spirit has split. And I'll go out and gather that back for them to make them whole again. And it's dark. It's traumatic. If I were to live in that moment, I would live a life of tears for these people, for their suffering. And the first thing I do, the first thing I do is find something to make me laugh, and because darkness cannot live in joy. Darkness feeds on fear. These entities that are sucking us dry, they're living on fear and sadness and depression. And it's why 85% of Americans are on antidepressants. It is sad. It's ridiculous. They cannot deal with the tragedy of their past life connections, whether you want to call it past lives, parallel universes, entity attachments. We can go on and on with that. But I wake up, I come out of these meditations, and I say, I need something right now to make me laugh. And Phil Escott's group does that every time. All I have to do is scroll through just for a minute.
When I was really sick, the one thing I never lost was my sense of humor. I'd occasionally get really pissed off and punch a wall or something, go, why me, when you're in that stupid state, instead of learning from it. And you go through that. But there is this, there was always that sense of the ridiculous that was there. And I think that's absolutely essential if you've got it anyway. I feel people who don't have it are missing a serious tool in the toolbox.
Well, there can be a disconnect. If your crown chakra is completely open, but you're not grounded, then you're not getting a full connection from the top to the bottom. And you can be an amazing psychic, an amazing healer, and have no connection to reality. And that's what I love about you and maybe 4 other people I've met in my life. Ultimately, I think most people live. I think most people live in some place in between. But the magic happens when you just say, "I'm just going to be balls out." Like anything goes. I cannot be dishonest. I have to tell you the truth. And I have ingratiated into this world, and I've had a great 3D career, and because ultimately saving people and saving souls is not going to pay the bills. I do that because that's what I was put here to do. And I'm going to do that whether I want to do that or not. But when I put my effort toward doing that, I get magical blessings in return. And sometimes it's simple. Like maybe I catch every green light.
Yes. Do you get every parking space as well?
I get every parking space. Do you get that too?
There's one gig we do, right, regularly, and it's in the outskirts of Liverpool, and it's a really busy road, and there's never a parking space. Not ever in that road, particularly straight outside the venue. It's one of the most clogged up parts of it. And every single time I go there, and there's a parking space. In fact, the last time I went there and there was no parking space. So I thought, this is the first time I've not been able to get a parking space. Shit. And so I drove just up to the parking space, and the taxi came out of the exact parking space I wanted. He'd only stopped to get a sandwich. And it just happens all the time. And the rest of the band are like, how do you do this every time? Because sometimes I'll be there and there's like 5 spaces. And I think, how can I stand in them all, keep them for the rest of the band? And I can't. And then when they turn up, there's no spaces, and they're in the car park or something nearby. It's funny, it's funny. And kids parking space when we're with the kids, and you turn up to a supermarket or something, and you go, they'll be, nah, not at this time. There's always one. There's always you just as long as you create that reality and you go in there thinking there's going to be one. I don't know exactly what happens. It's like, if a tree falls, and is there a sound if no one's there to hear it? When you're driving into that car park, does a car vanish or something? What exactly happens? That's what I want to know. I want to see the CCTV.
No, I think maybe like realities are collapsing on on one another at that time. Because parking spaces is a funny one. My friends that know me and know my abilities, when they ride in the car with me, they call it the Harry Potter car. Because I have the ability. If you and I were here together, I could touch your arm or hold your hand, and you could see the world through my eyes. And it's very 3D. I can see everything glistens. I can see all the veins in the trees. Everything comes at me. It's not like I'm driving down the road. It's like an acid trip. It's like the road rises up to meet me. And one of my really good friends that I've known for years, I picked her up for the first time in the airport, and she grabbed the car. She goes, did someone put something in my drink? I mean, she said, what's going on? But then she got used to it, after she'd been around me. She calls it my Harry Potter magic carpet, if you will. But that's how I see the world. And I forget that other people don't see it that way. That's just where I live. I constantly see energies around people. I very rarely see faces. It's almost always just a color, a shining color. But I can focus on the face, but I have to really ground myself down into that moment. And it's interesting because when I started eating just meat, everything went from magical to super magical.
That was going to be my next question. It was. What happened? What did it do to that? Because that's the whole point of these podcasts. It's beautiful to see what happened as their journey out of vegetables and into meat, and what happened to the whole spiritual side of people. So yeah, go for it.
I had done quite a bit of keto, but I call it more of a heavy protein keto, animal fat for a while, which was great. But it still wasn't perfect. I still had multiple absorption issues, stomach issues, some of the spiritual things still lingering around. And I went totally radical and decided to do this fast. And I had no idea that it was going to last 21 days, but it ended up lasting 21 days. Green tea and water. I didn't even do any electrolytes, Phil. I did some salt. Didn't do any electrolytes. And 5 days turned into 7 days. And Lord have mercy, I had mucus coming out of every orifice. I mean, you name it. My body just went through. I had a nosebleed. My body went through. I had moles fall off. You hear these stories all the time. You're like, whoa. And I said, okay, I'm just going to keep going until I feel like I have to eat. 21 days later, 21. When I look back, fucking kidding me? I went 21 days without eating any food, and I actually felt fantastic because I wasn't trying to force kale down my throat, and dealing with that. And I came out of that, and I said, okay, perfect elimination opportunity. I'm going to start adding a few things back. And I started with bone broth. It was okay. Then I added egg yolks, did meat. But every single time I tried to reintroduce a vegetable, it's like, forget about it. I mean, the devil was riding on my shoulder. All those negative energy things that I had to deal with were personified, which I always knew that about carbs in general. That's why I had been low carb for as long as I had. But taking all carbs out made a huge, huge difference. And then coffee was a big one. I got to tell you, from my health, I kept trying to add coffee back after the fast, and I still had some caffeine with the green tea, but I finally said, no, I'm done with coffee. I'm never touching it again. So there was like a multitude of things that happened. Everything fell into place at that particular point. And I don't even know what to say. Like, it's such ecstasy and such joy. It's like I could wake up every single day of my life and feel the best version of myself. And I say, how did I get it so wrong trying to eat all those vegetables to enlightenment? I had so many people. My yoga instructor, I counseled her. She was so messed up, okay, in her life. I counseled her on so many things. And she's like, I can't eat meat and tap into my yoga spirit body. I'm like, I think you can. I think you can. I think you can do it. You know, I mean, I hear stories like that all the time. Like, oh, meat is heavy. It's acidic. It's this. It's that. You know, I still had massive histamine issues, even with eating cooked meat. It didn't cure everything. I had to get into the circadian health. I had to get into blocking blue light. You know, all the things that you preach about and talk about as well. And I went 100% raw for 6 months and cured my histamine problem. And let me tell you, I felt like a freak of nature. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, I'm embarrassed. Like, I can't even leave the house and go out and have a meal because I'm eating raw flesh. You know, this is the opposite of what anybody would consider spiritual. You know, and now I can eat a mixture of cooked and raw, but I still love raw meat. I'm not going to lie. But I can't cook anything slow cooked. Bone broth is an absolute no bueno. It does not work. I've even tried the pressure cooker where you cook it for 2 hours, and I can do some collagen powder or gelatin powder, and I definitely try to do that. Also, thanks to Jack Cruz, I've one of the supplements that I still use is glycine powder, which really helps. Which glycine is one of the major things that is great for if you're trying to get that balance, especially with the reason why people eat bone broth, etc. And then I also, you know, have done this iodine protocol, which has been another big game changer. And yes, I did the iodine sponges in the vagina. I had some uterine fibroids and also breast fibroids, which goes hand in hand with what I told you about keeping the lymph clean. You know, I have no doubt, especially with a particular client that I dealt with about a year ago, some evil shit, Phil. And his spirit left some, I mean, I think it was cancer in my body. I think it was cancer, you know, and I was going through all this stuff with carnivore. I had gone raw carnivore. I could still feel the congestion. I finally got turned on to the iodine and flushed it out. Pure hell, I tell you, with this iodine.
Was this from Carno Pine on the group, or did you find it out independently?
So I had found it out independently before Carno. And I was taking 50 milligrams a day, 50 milligrams. Okay. And I thought, how can I go wrong? I mean, this is a million times more than the RDA. I am flushing it out. I know that I am. And then I bumped into him and he's like, oh, no, 50 is nothing. You know, he's talking about 300, 360. And so I started reading the Abraham's protocol. And because of my medical background, I'm very familiar with medical research. And I hopped into that. Never thought about doing any type of vaginal insert. That was all Kano. And game changer. I mean, just between me and you, the first time I did the vaginal insert, as crazy as this sounds, I got instant brain clear. Insert, it hit my brain. And I said, what in the hell is going on here? So that was the start of that. But I had, you hear a lot of the women talk on the website and they say, or on the group, and they'll say, oh, I haven't really had any symptoms. Oh, I had lots of symptoms. My entire neck, all my lymph nodes in my neck were swollen. Even walking without a bra on, my breasts were engorged. They were painful.
This is before or during? After?
During. Yeah, this is when I went up to 100. I went up to 180, and then overnight I said, I'll just do 300 because that's what everybody else seems to be doing. So I filled up my little capsules, and what's interesting? On 2%, I had nothing was happening. I was on the 2% Lugol's, and I moved up to the 5% Lugol's, and that's when I started to have the flush. Because all of the iodine receptors for females are in their sex organs. So in your breast, your lymph tissue, and also had it in my groin area, my uterus. I had one small fibroid in the bottom right-hand side of my pelvis area. They'd been there for a long time. My gynecologist had been following it, and 3 months of 360 milligrams of 5% iodine daily, gone. I had actually had pictures of, I had red whelps that went all up where this lymph goes here into the right neck and down into this left breast. Not just on this left side. This is where it was all congested, which makes sense because spiritually this is where you receive everything, is through your left-hand side. And it was just getting clogged up in that area. It was one particular client. It's the nature of the beast. I suck it in, got to be able to get it out. And sometimes it gets clogged in there.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I'm toying with the idea of doing it, but I really want to understand it more. I mean, we got lucky with my mum, because with the cannabis oil, it's a breast tumor that was coming right through the skin. It seemed to be reducing, and it did a bit, but then she couldn't bear being that stoned and whatever. So we took her off that, and then started the iodine thing. I just saw it one day. I just came to me, how you have these ideas, and hang on, if it gets rid of fibrocystic breast syndrome and stuff, and it's to do with the hormones, and this is a hormonally driven breast tumor, and I thought, let's just give it a go. It's one of those funny ideas you get out of nowhere, because nobody was going on about it at the time, and we didn't give it that much. It was only 3 months of like 10 drops of 7% in a glass of water. And they said that, sometimes 3-4 months after that, then the breast tumor disappears. But we were also painting it on, and it one day she just, after I'd given up, and she just came in and said it's disappearing, and I looked at it, and it had almost completely disappeared. At least the skin was all back to normal. There was still a lump, but then the lump started reducing, and who knows, if she hadn't have died of the pneumonia, how much it would have reduced. It was fascinating, but I'm really thinking about it at the moment because my missus has Graves' disease, and she's doing great on the PKD diet, but I'm sort of thinking, I've got this thing about, she grew up in Arusha in Tanzania, and she's got like brown marks on her teeth. Her teeth are perfect. There's not even a filling, but there's these little brown marks that shows that she's had fluorosis, So then you're wondering about the halides and this and that, clogging up the thyroid, and it's probably full of oxalates as well, and God knows what. And then everybody's going, but you see, the one thing, if she had Hashimoto's, I'd go, great, pile in the iodine, but I've still got that fear of iodine only in that case of Graves' disease, where they say that then it can blow up the thyroid and that's it, that's the end of it. But if you look at the old sort of cures, they said high dose iodine was the cure for hyperthyroidism, not hypo. And so now it's just, we're sort of on that knife edge of what do we do? Is it necessary? Can we do it without it? Is it going to clear it out on its own? But the iodine thing is fascinating. It's the one ailment on the planet that I would have a problem with it because I've still got that indoctrination thing, like these people that think fat's bad for you or something. But I've only got it for the Graves thing. So it's just working out how to do it. So we've got her on the borax at the moment. Carno said, start. Yeah. What did you find that did, and how long were you on that? And you did it in preparation for the iodine, did you?
I had actually done that for quite a long time before I started the 50 milligrams a day, which I had been on for years and thought I was actually doing something with the 50 milligrams a day. And I still drink my borax. I love it. I take my couple of teaspoons every day. And, just from a medical standpoint, and opinions are like noses, everybody has one. I think for your missus that as long as you preload her with selenium, you have nothing to fear. Do it. You have everything to gain. Now, she's going to go through some detox. You mentioned the fluorosis. I had that situation when I first started detoxing from all the fluoride and I started the 50 milligrams a day. My entire backside of my teeth, what most people would call tartar or whatever, just peeled off in a layer. Peeled off in a layer. My dentist was like, what toothpaste are you using or whatever? And I said, I quit that toxic fluoride for one thing. That's when I got rid of everything, all fluoride and everything, the water, the toothpaste. The number one thing 5 years ago that I would tell people that would come to me for health issues, I'm like, if you don't get your water straight, you're screwed. Water is so valuable and so important. And yeah, we make our own water. And I don't know if you can feel it, but when I go out and ground and I'm in nature, like I just feel it moving through my body. And 9 times out of 10, I have to go to the bathroom like within 30 minutes. I'm like, I'm making so much water and so healthy. I'm just like a tree. I'm wonderful out here. I just wish I could live out there every day and never have to deal with any of this stuff. Hands down, carnivore for 2 years. And I'm strict, Phil. It's like, I did raw. I did mostly beef. I've now added back a lot of fish. Forget chicken, forget birds. They're inflammatory. It's just not going to work for me. I can definitely do fish now without any issues. Pork, once a week, once every 2 weeks. I have to be super careful with it as well.
I'm about the same now and again. Yeah, I can't eat roast pork though. Bacon and crackling, from the skin. Yeah, it seems to be fine, but I can't eat the actual meat of the roast pork. But bacon kind of all right. But still, I feel best on beef. Yeah.
Best on beef for sure. And I do feel I love to have salmon roe. Do some fish eggs. I feel like I need that omega-3 boost. I also like oysters. Raw oysters especially. So I follow Jack Cruz in that capacity.
There's always something about the day when you eat a load of oysters. It's a different consciousness.
It's the iodine. That's why you need to get on it. I'm telling you, please. Look, it is not normal what happens to you. Like the first couple of days, you're just going to feel high and amazing. You're going to be like, I've been missing iodine for my entire life. And then you go through this weird sluggish period where you feel like, oh, I've busted out my thyroid. I've now got some sort of chronic fatigue. Who knows what's going on? I'm never going to be the same again. You're super slow. And then everything magical happens. I don't know how to say it. Right now, I have settled on 100 milligrams a day as my maintenance dose. And it's been 6 months now that I've been at a mega dose. And I've been on the 100 milligrams for probably 3 weeks as my maintenance. And I don't know. I don't have a good answer. There's really not good science to support what I'm supposed to be doing long term. If you go to Google Dr. McCullough, he's going to say, if you're on 100 milligrams, he doesn't give a specified amount, but you can't do long term. You're going to ruin your thyroid or do whatever. But if I go a couple of days without it, I can tell a difference. I have no fear. And I get on these iodine protocol groups. Quite frankly, they've kicked me out of most of them because every time I say, oh, what? People are like, oh, I'm up to 2 drops, or whatever. And I'm like, well, you got a long way to go, champ. what's interesting is when I do, so I'm really into weightlifting, and I used to be a cardio fanatic when I ate carbs. Like, oh, I got to run that pumpkin pie off, on the treadmill or whatever. And you had like pumpkin pie flow. It didn't work out.
I owned a gym. And I used to write for mountain bike mags, and I was always doing cardio. I was lifting weights. I got big, but I never ever saw abs. And God, I worked for them so hard. And now all I need to do is drop dairy out 100%. And they pop out. It's bizarre while I'm sitting on my ass,
I know. I can do some raw dairy, like in even smaller amounts than pork. I tried to go there whenever I went 100% raw. Oh, you know what kills me? Butter. My God. I mean, I can start butter. It tastes so good. I have no problem digesting it, but I get this bloat, like this weird, 10 pounds later, 3 days later, I'm like, oh, it's because I stopped eating butter for 3 days, Like what? So obviously dairy, any type of dairy and I are not friends, and I just need to learn to deal with it. But butter tastes so damn good, doesn't it?
It was all that I had left apart from meat, I just butter and meat. And then when the missus got diagnosed with this Graves' disease, we talked to Zsofia Clements, for anyone who doesn't know, from Paleomedicina in Hungary. And we were chatting to her on Skype, and she said, absolutely, you can't even have a few molecules of dairy if you've got Graves'. And she said, oh, no, I've got to give up the butter. And so I said, okay, well, I'll do it with you. And it just blew me away. I mean, suddenly, the last bit, I was quite lean anyway, but everything just fell off. And all sinus issues. I had some sinus issues at the end of the winter, and I thought it was like, central heating and dry air and stuff like that. They just vanished. And it was ridiculous. I just ended up so skinny, and I thought, geez, I'm going to have to start training again. So I have, because I can't put on any weight now on what I eat unless it's muscle, unless I train. There's no way I'll put fat on. And I couldn't believe the butter was doing that, because I felt all right. I didn't have painful joints or anything. But that was, you get so hung up in your main illness, you sometimes don't listen to the whispers, And you think, well, my joints are all right, so I'm totally healthy, but I wasn't. And it blew me away. We were both like skeletons over the winter. Now she's heavier than me. She's got the eating back together again, and she's actually getting nourished, and the thyroid hormones are leveling out, and so she's not getting eaten away by that massive. You get this sort of 130 heart rate she had, and big high metabolism and fast metabolism and whatever that was just eating her. But yeah, I just feel it's time for another jump into that iodine thing. I remember it's like when I used to do highboard diving, and it's that feeling of just at the edge of the board, like, go on, you're scared of it, but you're going to have to go. And that's how I am with her at the moment, just figuring out the best way to do it, the safest way, because that's going to, there's the endocrinologist breathing down your neck saying diet doesn't work. And now he's kind of saying, hang on a minute, how have you done this so fast, So the diet's working, but then you ain't mention anything to do with iodine, and it's just, you're going to kill yourself if you do that. So you listen to all that propaganda, and so it's difficult. So I'm chatting with Carno, and the thing is, there isn't any actual science, is there? There isn't anything. You just got to have a leap of faith, like with the carnivore thing. And we'll see if it wasn't Graves, but I kind of fancy trying it myself. I haven't ever tried it. So,
well, it's interesting. I just read a post by somebody, not in our group, but a different group, who developed Graves' disease at some point. She was dabbling in iodine or whatever, and now she's back to iodine to treat her Graves' disease. Just getting started. I think if I could give any words of wisdom, it would be, and you already know this, do it with no fear. I have no fear for you. I have no fear for your missus. And, I say go for the gusto. Like, just, I will say this, you need to salt load. The chloride really helps move those bromides out of the system. And I gained immediately 6 to 8 pounds. First of all, my boobs, it's like, whoa. I went from no boobs to some boobs. And I'm like, Lord, I hope this stays. Forget the rest of it. But it's interesting because the larger your breasts are, the more iodine you actually need to saturate your tissues, which is an interesting fact. And I salt loaded. There's a salt load protocol on the breast cancer, iodine breast cancer website. I'll send you the link. And it probably took 3 or 4 days of salt loading. And I just started peeing and peeing and peeing and peeing. I peed out 6 of the 8 pounds, and they never came back. And the boobs stayed perky. We got a winner. We got a winner. Do it. Just jump in there. But I got to tell you, anybody else would have thought they had leukemia, lymphoma, God knows what, if they would have went through what I went through for 4 or 5 days when I started it and was really flushing it out. I was like, this is crazy. I mean, my scalp hurt, my hair follicles. And then I felt great after that. I mean, the first 2 days I was absolutely high. It was as if I had taken a bump of cocaine in the 80s or something, which I never did cocaine. But it's what I would imagine that it would have felt like. I'm like, woo! I was ready to go. I was doing whatever. I was out working out, and I really felt the surge in my muscles and pumping iron. And then I went from that to laying on the couch for like 3 days. I'm like, I can barely move. I must have exhausted all my energy. And then I just completely leveled off. It's like my hormones went through a massive, massive shift. And from a female perspective, I had 2 months of absolutely the worst period I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, it felt like it was purging something from the depths of hell, from the last God knows how many years. And I'm like, well, I wasn't expecting that. It could have been the vaginal inserts that were causing all that. I'm not, that was causing all that. I'm not sure. I think you should do both, or actually paint the thyroid. Or for men, I think Cook's protocol to paint your groin area, your scrotum, super important, especially for your testosterone count.
That's right. I love your fearlessness with this. I love it. You're just fearless. I know. I've been like that. I mean, I remember when I was healing up, just the crazy things I did, and it was just like, fuck it, just do it,
Coffee enemas?
Yeah. We had a little chat, didn't we, about losing control of them. Jesus.
I mean, that is the end all be all. I'm like, when I stoop to the coffee enemas, the shit has hit the fan, literally.
I never even liked it in the other end, and there I am lying on the floor in the bathroom, shoving my ass full of coffee. I thought, what the hell am I doing? And then it ended up blasted all over the wall, and I thought, well, that teaches me a lesson, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, when you were vegan, they had you on all detox protocols. I did them all. But to be honest with you, when I got rid of fiber, there was more in there that needed to come out. I mean, the first 6 months I was carnivore, I was like, here we go again with the endless poop, And then one day it stopped and the belly was flat and everything was magical. I just, I probably didn't give you a really good picture because I know we've talked way over our time, but.
No, we haven't. We're cool.
Oh, we're good? Okay, good. Because I just, I went through such hell, Phil. I went through hell, man. I did it all. I mean,
that's what makes us.
Short of an exchange transfusion, whatever. I was reading Dr. McCullough's new book, Fat for Fuel, or latest book, Fat for Fuel. He goes and gets bloodletting. He does bloodletting every month. And he has this whole theory about too much iron in the body. I'm not sure I believe all that, but and he was talking a little bit about the mTOR thing, which I think is completely nonsense.
Well, I heard a real interesting thing that made so much sense about the mTOR thing. Did you hear about that? Where they're saying that, it was all done on studies with rats, and they found that if they, and whatever, they're just sedentary rats, and so it increased mTOR everywhere in the body, and that might drive cancer. But, nature doesn't make mistakes. There's that pathway for a reason. And so what you want it for is muscle growth. And so if you train, that shifts the mTOR pathway into the muscles and out of the liver and stuff like that. And so you have no problems. And it's just, again, what we would have done. You eat a load of meat, and then you go and do some exercise, you go and hunt some animal and drag it back, or you go down the gym or whatever it is you do, and you're fine. It's no problem with the mTOR pathway. It's a pathway that's supposed to be there. People forget this stuff. They're always arguing with the body, saying there's some problem here with this pathway and that pathway. It's just looking through the microscope and trying to see a landscape.
Oh, I love that. I love that analogy. And it's so true. I mean, the bodybuilders have had it right, I think, for a very long time. You protein load, even though they will try to eat some carbs or carb load in order to stimulate that mTOR response, because that's ultimately how you build muscle. But in reality, you can just double up on your protein intake. And I play around with that a good bit with the protein to fat ratios. In the beginning, when I was healing a lot more, I found that more fat was better at that time because I was more sedentary. Oh my God, working out caused such an inflammatory response at that point when I was still healing with my histamines. And, my whole theory is that my body was in a hyper healing mode, and I really had a mast cell activation syndrome where ultimately my body was just firing off mast cells because it was saying, we're healing everything that you've been through, and the valve has been turned on and we don't know how to turn it off. Ultimately. So I had to slow down that histamine response when I went raw. And at that time, I was still eating quite a bit of fat. So a 2-to-1 fat ratio. But I have found now that I'm healthier. I love working out. I miss that so much. I can remember back in the day, you go work out and you get that release, where afterward you get a high and you feel great. And I'm like, where has that gone? I have lost it. And I find now that doubling up on my protein on the days that I'm going to lift weights and not really worry about my fat intake, just whatever's the natural fat intake that comes with the meat, maybe add a little ghee or suet or whatever you have in the fridge, and just pound it out. Like start building, I'm watching TV or doing whatever and just lifting weights. I've got them here at the house. I bought some dumbbells and some kettlebells, and I feel so much better. I get that release afterward, and I don't need all the fat that I used to have. And I think reading the post on the group, and that's one of the primary things that I really stress, even if you're going to do a higher fat ratio, your body needs to cycle, and you need to have days where you do a higher protein ratio, because glycogen restoration is important for muscle development, for brain function. Ultimately, we need those glycogen stores. We don't need a glucose source, but we need those glycogen stores. And I think that's the hardest thing for people. And I wish it would have been easy for me, where I could have just said, I'm going to eat steak and be happy for the rest, cooked grilled steak and be happy for the rest of my life. But Lord have mercy, that is not the way it happened.
It's funny, but again, it's what's the best way to figure it out? There's people doing all these sort of charts and apps and things like that. Just listen to your body. I have days when I really want a load of protein. Like this morning, I wanted a load of protein. I just worked out. I wanted a load of protein. I didn't want any fat. And now this evening, just when I was waiting for you to come on, I went and threw some beef short ribs in with a shitload of extra grass-fed fat around it that's going to go crispy and drain the rest off for tallow. And I'm going to pig out on fat tonight just because I feel like it. And then tomorrow I might not. And then the next day I might dry fast. Who knows, And it's just listening to your body, isn't it? It's cutting out all the crap where you're constantly craving biscuits and chocolate and ice cream and stuff like that. Once that's gone, you can start to get the right cravings in. And you know exactly what your body wants with fat and protein. It just tells you.
My digestion was so noisy for so long. I mean, it was a constant hum. It's the only way I can describe it. What was going on in this gut was tumultuous. It was loud. I didn't know it until it stopped, Phil. And then I'm like, so this is silence. So this is what happens when you go to the mountaintop and you decide you want to meditate for 4 days. I remember the third night of only eating meat, laying in the bed, and I'm like, something's different. Like, what is different? Like, oh my God, I cannot hear my intestines, right? Which is huge. And the only time I hear my intestines now is if I eat out at a restaurant and they've inevitably used some sort of cheap oil, or if I try to consume dairy. I keep going back to it. I'm like, but it tastes so good, you know, and it's fine until about 3 hours later. And then it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, nope, not going back down that road again. But
I can get away with it once, like once in a blue moon. I can have a real big cheese binge, but then if I have one the next day, I'm in trouble. But as long as I have one, the body goes, that's it, that's your lot. You're going to have to wait another couple of weeks or a month, and that's it.
But my whole point is, I don't know that the intuition to listen to your body is always there when you haven't completely detoxed, you know. And I think that higher fat is the quickest way to do that in the beginning. That's my humble opinion, you know. And higher fat comes with some side effects. You know, you're going to take more trips to the bathroom. You're going to, and quite frankly, it doesn't taste as good as a good old piece of juicy muscle meat, you know. But I know a lot of people still have issues, and I'm always, you know, take it back to beef, but that's hard to do. You don't want to take it back to beef. I mean, you feel like I'm making all these sacrifices and I just want to be normal, like a normal person. But in reality, what is normal is abnormal for our genetic makeup.
Totally. I don't have that anymore. I love it. I love the idea of going into a restaurant, just getting meat. And they go, well, what do you want with that? Well, what about the chips? What about, you know, with the fries, as you call it? And it goes on. And then in the end, the damn thing comes out with some green hairstyle on it, you know? And I said, look, I said no fucking plants, you know, just none. But it always ends up there's some plants. Yeah, you know, you can scrape them off or whatever. But it happens, you know, they can't bear. You can see them looking at a plate with a steak on, they're going, no, put the salad on. You know, they can't. I don't care what he said, you know.
Something. I did it for years. You know, I had my vegetables. I mean, here's my theory. If you have to blend it in a supersonic blender in order to digest it, you don't need it, right? Like, we were not designed to eat that.
No, you blend it in the supersonic blender so it comes out really fast without scraping the intestines on the way out. It's the only difference. It still just blasts out, doesn't it?
It's a huge I can't deal with it. It goes, kale was torture. And I'm like, I've got to do it. It's a superfood. It didn't matter how I tried to eat it. It did not work out.
Absolutely disgusting. Anyway, listen, Holly, before we go, tell me some of the things that you do, because I'm totally fascinated with your healing and the different methods and stuff that you do. Run us through a few of the things that you actually do with people and why you'd choose them and things like that. I think it's fascinating.
Okay, that's an interesting story. So I don't advertise. It's all word of mouth. And I have several clients that I've worked with for multiple years. And then I have some randoms that come in. And I do different things. Like, every person is different. I never know where any session is going to go. And I've actually done some sessions with several people on 100%, the 100% site, via Skype and phone. And I never know where it's going to go. It's so bizarre. So typically what happens is I just start sensing things in my body, and then I start tuning into their higher self. And it's never the same, Phil, with any person. I do a big one is cutting ancestral lines and curses. Ultimately, people are born, and whether you believe that you choose to be born into a certain family or a certain lineage, is strong. If you want to call it past lives, or you want to call it parallel universes or existence, different timeline existence, it's all the same. Ultimately, the soul has known many, many different ways to live in this earth that we inhabit right now. And your genetic makeup is a huge part of that. And your family, your parents, and cutting those cords, it's something that each individual can do themselves, but most individuals are not in tune enough to actually do that. So I do a lot of remote healing. Some things I can do in real time with the person in that moment. The way my energy works is that once they blend with me, if I give them a list of things that they need to do, then it will kind of, with intent, then it will kind of finish off what they need to cut the cord or be reborn or kind of start fresh. However, if they continue to do things the same way that they've always done them before, then all those same genetic mappings and genetic codings will come back into play. So it's usually a process, and it usually takes more than just one time, depending on what's going on with the person. If let's say I told you to burn, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say I said, Phil, I've had a session with you and you need to burn an orange candle for 30 minutes for the next 3 nights. If you chose to go to the store and burn an orange candle, it probably wouldn't make a difference. But because you had blended with my energy and you and I were both putting our intent toward what we were trying to accomplish based on the curses that you have been dealing with for your entire incarnation in this life, us together can tackle this. So that's where I come in, like an ancillary person. A rape or a brutal beating or trauma or child abuse is a much different animal. It gets me down, Phil, when I start talking about that. But it's real, especially with children. They're innocent, and even though they might have been incarnated into this world with certain predispositions, they're innocent when they come in, and then they're traumatized, and a part of their soul splinters, and they can't get it back. So that's something I have to do on my own. And then sometimes people who dabble in spirituality that don't really pay attention to the fact that there's a dark force out there. Everything's not unicorns and rainbows. You go into meditation, you go into a transcendental type state, whatever that state may be for you, and it shoots up a flare into what I call the fourth dimension, where there's a lot of dark entities that are looking to attach. And sometimes it's dead people, and sometimes it's just what I call evil forces, however you want to deal with that. And those entities can latch on and affect people's thought patterns, life. To the point to where the individual thinks that it's their own thoughts, it's their own person. But we can detach this entity, and then within 24 hours, they become their core being again. Now, the entity always tries to come back, so we have to hit it and hit it and hit it again till we can get rid of it, depending on how strong it is and really where it came from. But, there's a lot of schools of thought that there are entities out there that feed off of the humans and the fear and have all these horrible things that happen in the media and these traumas that happen in order to latch on and manipulate people. So I spend a lot of time dealing with that. If that makes any sense to your viewers, I don't know, but hopefully it makes a little bit of sense to you. It certainly makes sense to people who are enduring it. And then we have good old-fashioned black magic that we can't overlook. Right now I live 2.5 hours from New Orleans, and if you've got $50 and a photograph and lucky enough to get a lock of hair of the person that you're interested in screwing up their life, there are plenty of people there that can make that happen. There's a balance for everything. The good versus evil, the light versus dark.
I remember going through a bit of paranoia about that when I cut my dreadlocks off and I sold them on eBay. And then suddenly I suddenly thought, geez, I hope these don't end up in the wrong hands.
Right. No, good point. Good point. But ultimately, if they didn't have some background information on you before your dreadlocks, you're good to go. But there's one particular practitioner in New Orleans that I've reversed several curses that she has done for individuals here. And this is, high influencing. It is real. Either energy is neither created nor destroyed. And you're either for the good team or the bad team. And if you want to harness darkness, you can do that. But if you want to be a light bearer, you can do that too. And, people like me were put here to balance evil people like that out. And voodoo's real, hoodoo's real, the Haitian influence. Not all Haitian, not all hoodoo is bad. Some of it is really good, but it's sad, but the majority of the curses have to do with love and women who want a man who was never their man to begin with, and they go pay $150 to ruin somebody's life because they want a particular individual to fall in love with them. Or it's sad, but I deal a lot with that, and I don't know. I mean, I meet people where they're at and I help them as much as I can. But the number one thing that I always tell them is you got to get your diet clean. Your body is your temple.
It's like with the mental illness stuff. I say it to people that just get the diet clean and then see what you're left with. And then you can deal with all that subtle stuff, Yeah. Holly, that's fascinating. I tell you what, that's opened up a can of worms for me. We're going to have to get you back on again to go deeper into that stuff, because I've really enjoyed this. It's been great.
Well, I hope I gleaned some light for your listeners. And the main message I want to give is meat saved me. I'll never go back. I'm not saying I'm never going to eat a vegetable again. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm never going to eat a fruit again, but right now it's not on the horizon. And I'm just so thankful, the person that you see sitting here right now, and the joy that I have in my heart, and, just the joy that I know I'm going to live the rest of my life with. It would not have been without making a change, big change. And I want to be normal every day. I want to be normal, man. I'm like, I want to eat it. I want to eat an apple or do something, but you know what I miss? Can I tell you this before we get off the phone? If I tell you I miss anything, it's cheese dip and corn chips. I'm a salty snacker. I never really ate dessert, but I'm like, I miss like good Mexican food. Maybe some tomatoes. I don't know, some spices. I used to love spicy foods.
Oh, yeah. I spent my whole time cooking Indian food, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I loved it. Indian food, Thai food, but not anymore. I'd probably literally go up and smoke if I had curry at this point. I don't know.
I can take it once in a blue moon as long as it's not with the rice, Once every now and again I have a lamb curry or something, but not often.
Well, I just want you to know, wait, before you hang up, I've got to say this. I just want you to know that you have been absolutely an inspiration and phenomenal, and your group has been amazing, and I have met some of the most wonderful people, and I salute you, and I salute everything that you're doing. And, I also want to be a channel and a conduit, to open up and help people. And I know you in your heart feel the same way.
Absolutely. Oh, that's beautiful, Holly. I mean, it's just, when I hear people say things like that it's been an influence, it's just so rewarding, isn't it? When you just see people heal, and it's lovely, and they do it off their own bat. It's not me. It's nothing to do with me. I just sort of, life has those funny twists for a simple drummer. It's strange. Oh, I can't say that anymore. Sorry, Jeremy. I'm not allowed to say I'm just a drummer. I have to say I'm a complete genius. No, I'll let Jeremy say that. But it's lovely. It really is. Yeah. Look, Holly, thank you so much. Is there anywhere people can find you that I'll put a link or something? Or do you just want to keep it word of mouth, or just want to, they can find you through that carnivore group?
No, let's just find me through the carnivore group. I have a real day job that I have to focus on, which is highly important.
But I think you're going to get some interest from this. I think there's going to be people very fascinated. I'm really fascinated. I want to get on Skype with you and have you pull my head apart and my soul.
Well, maybe we'll get to do that in person when we're at the carnivore retreat in May.
Oh, fantastic. Please come along. That'll be fantastic. Yeah. That would be lovely. Hey, Holly, so I'm just going to hang up this bit and then we'll chat afterwards and say goodbye. So thanks everyone for listening. That was amazing with Holly, and I think we're going to have her on again because there's a wealth of knowledge in there, isn't there? Wow. Holly, thank you so much for chatting.